Young Osman, the tragic reformer and the wrath of the rebellious Hearth. Part 1. Introduction. A throne forced and a vow taken. The year 1618 marked a turning point in the history of the Ottoman Empire. The new Sultan, Osman II, Genç Osman, Young Osman, ascended the throne. Although barely 14 years old, he was not just a young Sultan. He was a fervent idealist and a determined reformist spirit, unlike his peers. The events preceding his reign had fueled his ambition. He had personally experienced the shame brought by his uncle Mustafa I, who was taken from the kafes, the cage, to the throne after his powerful father Ahmed I's reign, and the resulting chaos in state administration. Mustafa's alleged madness and the turmoil in the palace created a vow in young Osman's soul to cleanse this dishonor and restore the state to the discipline and power of the former Kanuni, Süleyman the Magnificent era. Young Osman's strength lay in his extraordinary intelligence, resolve, and the courage to break with tradition. He spoke fluent Arabic and Persian and had a deep interest in history and literature. Yet, this very intelligence was also his weakness. He knew the state's decline stemmed from the indiscipline of the Janissary corps and the corruption that plagued the palace. His goal was immense, but his excessive haste in execution and his failure to adequately assess the entrenched power of the Janissary corps would seal his fate. He would pay with his life for attempting major changes before consolidating his power. In the palace, there was a constant tension between the determined face of the young Sultan and the suspicious glances of the old, conservative pashas and the ulema, religious scholars. Young Osman wanted to rule not with whispers, but with command and the sword. Part 2. Defiance of traditions and fissures in the palace. Young Osman's first reform attempts shook the foundations of the palace and the traditional order. He pursued not only political but also social and cultural reforms. Although Ottoman sultans engaged in political marriages, they traditionally chose their hasekiler, chief consorts, from among the slave girls in the harem. However, young Osman shattered this long-standing tradition. The first betrayal of tradition. Against all objections from his family and the divan, he married Akile Hatun, the daughter of the Sheikhul Islam, head of Islam, Esad Effendi, a free woman from outside the palace. This was not merely a love story. It was a political protest against the conservative structure of the palace. He wanted to establish a system closer to Western-style monogamy, away from the intrigues of the harem. This marriage created the first major fissure, uniting all traditionalist factions in the palace against him, especially the supporters of Kösem Sultan, who still held sway in the harem. Unknowingly, young Osman had caused the birth of the very alliance that would sign his death warrant. The Sultan experimented with reforms not only in his private life, but also in public. He mingled with the populace, sometimes in disguise, conducting inspections to personally witness the corruption of the pashas and viziers. While these brave steps were appreciated by the people, they deeply disturbed the state officials who feared losing their privileges. Part 3. The shame of Kotin and the decision for change. Young Osman wanted to prove his authority not only through decrees, but also on the battlefield. To this end, he launched the Kotin campaign against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1621. This expedition was supposed to be a saga of conquest for him. Instead, it turned into a bitter disappointment due to the indiscipline and reluctance of the Janissaries to fight. Indiscipline and shame. Throughout the campaign, the Janissaries were focused on looting, disobeying orders, and even collaborating with the enemy. At the most critical moments of the war, young Osman painfully realized that his army was no longer a strength, but an obstacle. The honor of the Ottoman army was being destroyed before his eyes. This was a moment of shame and a breaking point for him. It was after this experience that young Osman made a decision no one had dared to make since ascending the throne: to abolish the Janissary corps. He planned to raise an entirely new army, collected from Egypt, Syria, and Anatolia, who would be absolutely loyal to him. Eradicating the corps was essential to saving the empire. However, this decision meant shattering not only a military, but also a political, social, and religious taboo. The Janissaries were not just soldiers, they were a massive power, responsible for the city's security and deeply interwoven with the guilds and the ulema. Part 4. The Circle of Rebellion and Betrayal. Young Osman's intentions could not be kept secret in the palace. The rumor that he would abolish the corps and travel to Anatolia and then Egypt to recruit soldiers spread like wildfire through the Jay. They did not issue a fatwa for the Sultan's blood to be spilled, but by supporting those who opposed him and remaining silent, they paved the way for the rebellion. The rebels stormed the palace gates. Young Osman tried to resist in the throne room, risking his own life, but this defiance was futile. The rebels deposed the young Sultan and reinstated his mentally unstable uncle, Mustafa I, to the throne. For young Osman, this was not just the loss of the throne, it was the mockery of all his hard work and idealism. Part 5. The Yedikule Dungeons and the Tragic End. The deposed young Osman was subjected to an unprecedented humiliation in history. The Janissaries and Sipahis paraded him on horseback, half naked, his feet chained, and under the insults of a huge crowd, from the palace to the Yedikule Dungeons, fortress of the 7 towers. This was the first and most shocking instance of a sultan being publicly disgraced by his own subjects. The cold of the dungeon and the bloody atrocity. The damp and cold walls of the Yedikule dungeons became young Osman's final stop. His face was covered in blood, and his soul was tormented by the pain of the betrayals he had endured. The Janissary Agha Davut Pasha and other rebel leaders were not content with merely strangling him. They brutally murdered the young Sultan, who had shattered the corps' pride, through physical torture as a symbol of the rebellion. That horrific end, where his ears and nose were cut off and his throat was constricted by a noose, was the most savage and bloody example of resistance to authority and change. Young Osman's body was wrapped in a rug and left in Yedikule. His death was a first in Ottoman history. A sultan had been murdered by his own subjects with such savage violence. His story proves how even the best-intentioned reforms and the greatest ambitions can meet a tragic end in the face of entrenched power. He was the young sultan who sacrificed his life for reform, his name etched into memory as a tragic hero. His blood would pave the way for the iron-fisted authority of Murad IV, who would ascend to the throne a century later.